And welcome back in another edition Stripe Show podcast. I'm your host, Travis Fulton. Here on final day of vacation here in the Pacific Northwest. We'll be back in the studio next week as we keep this run of great instruction going on here on the podcast. Been a terrific month. Let's keep it rolling here as the guy next to me just got back from the Twin Cities. It's the 3M Open this week up in Minnesota. One of the top short game coaches in the world, James Sieckmann. James, thanks for joining us here on the podcast.
Good, Travis. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So you've got 5 players in the field this week. I know you've got multiple players, not only in the PGA Tour, but PGA Tour champions, LPGA Tour, the amateur game. But the 5 players this week, you've got Cameron Tringale, Stewart Cink, Brendan Hagy, Ben Martin, and Bo Hoag. All in the field, and you'll be pleased to know that your boy Tringale is off to another great start, birding the first 3 holes at Twin Cities. But give us some perspective here, James. You got 5 guys in the field. You get in, I would imagine, late Sunday, early Monday. You've got a lot of work ahead of you. How did that pan out over 3 days of preparation with 5 players?
Yeah, so essentially you just set up appointments like you would at a club. The difference would be that some players would say, okay, after we finish what we're going to do on the practice area, I need to go out on the golf course and I want to talk about these 3 holes or this spot on the course. And so you certainly do some course specific work as well. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, you're right. I fly in on Monday. Luckily, this is the first tournament. You don't have to take a COVID test. So that was nice. It just goes right out to the golf course. It saves me a day, basically, or half a day. And let's see. First lesson was the Stewart Cink, and so he was really on point, I think, with a lot of his short game. Travis, putting looked amazing, very confident around the green. But last week at the Open Championship, he was in 4th place after the first day. And then playing great. He played great in practice. And then his opening tee shot on Friday kind of hit a big old hook into the heather and made a mess of it. And it just took him an hour and a half to recover, basically. He just, the shock to the system. So quite honestly, we spent a majority of the time just talking about mental toughness and having the right approach when bad things happen. And I and his caddy, which is his son, Reagan, were just working and talking together about the things we can do to bounce back quicker, to refocus and whatnot. Certainly did some, technique work and did a wedge combine and the things we typically do. And then I would also say that not just with him, but with all the players, one of the big discussions for the week was just the rough. It's patchy, it's thick. There's a lot of grain in there. It's clumpy. And so a lot of time was spent just going around the greens, working on that. And unfortunately, the practice area didn't really match the golf course. The rough wasn't nearly as thick or as long. So we had to do quite a bit of work out on the course.
So with the rough this week like that, and the guy takes you out there in some of these specific shots, what are you looking at when you're evaluating the ball sitting in the rough? Is it, the length of the rough, the thickness,
right,
what's happening around it, and what kind of determines, maybe the amount of leading edge or not, or maybe a, kind of a bunker type technique, all these things that go into assessing the lie and then making the decision that what type of shot you're going to hit.
Right. Well, I remember Greg Rose asked me to write down adaptations for different grasses and lies and whatnot, and I got to like 120, so I'm going to quit just because so many different types of grasses. There's teed up, or if it's sitting down, if it's into the grain, down grain. Is it Kukua or Bermuda or bent or bluegrass, or is it wet? Is it so? There's a ton of uphill, downhill, all those. So it's very ball specific to lie specific, and usually you're looking at density of the grass, how many blades per square inch, so it's really packed together. You're looking at moisture, not only in the grass, but in the ground underneath. Obviously, if the ground underneath is wet, the ball's definitely going to come out slow. You're looking at the direction of the grain. and obviously the type of grass, because some grasses like fescue are thick bladed and grab more than like a bluegrass might. Uh, and then also you're looking at how much air is under the ball. So a lot of times the rough is so thick that the most common mistake for a really nice player, proper player, would be that there's an inch and a half of air under the ball and it's really thick and it's still sitting down. There's 3 inches of grass over the ball and an inch and a half underneath it of air, and so it's judging the right angle of attack to hit the ball solid. And you're right. I mean, there's a splash shot or a bunker type shot is one shot among many. It might be one shot among 15 or 20 of them that you might play, and it's all about judgment. And then I would also say that you got to manage expectations. You got to proximity to the hole out of the fairway inside 30 yards on tours, essentially 3 feet 11 inches. And if you, depending on how far away you are, when you get in the rough, you better add 5 or 6 feet to that. And a lot of guys, they'll chip it to 8 feet and they're so pissed that they can't see straight, and that they need to realize that that's not a bad shot. And like I said, they might lose focus or get down. And so expectations is, I think, important at that level as well.
So if the balls, if you've got some air underneath, and even though it's, and you might have some grass on top of it, grass going a different way, then there is that option of the bunker shot, right? Versus if the ball's sitting down more in the bottom and there's no air underneath it.
Right. So my thought would be the easiest way to maybe explain it would be that if this is the ground, the club comes into the ball, let's say fairway lie about 6 with an angle of attack of about 6 degrees. Typically, you want the face a little open to the path if you can do that from a technique standpoint. Well, if the ball's sitting down with a bunch of rough behind it, it's sitting on the ground. You need to steepen the delivery. So instead of 6, you might come in at 10. And then speed is always your friend. So you want to release that thing with some vigor, and not only that, maybe add with a little longer swing, or maybe defer down the club. But the real issue is, like, if you got an inch and a half of air underneath it and you steepen the delivery to try and get good contact, and you go underneath a bit where it hits high in the face, now the ball goes nowhere. So you got one come flying out and the next one goes halfway. And that's the part that's delicate. You got to figure out not only, like I said, the density of the grass, in, wet, into the grain, all those things. You got to figure out how much down angle you need. And so that's a big factor is ball position. And I'm not a big fan of leading edge, even in the rough, unless I can hit the ball first, unless I can put the ball so far back in my stance, I know I can get at the top of the ball. And that's a very specific lie. You typically know it when you see it, but you can't see it from 6 or 8 feet away. You got to be standing right over the top of it.
So the attack angles is how steep or how shallow the attack angle is a big piece that you might work on in preparation for the tournament, right? To get that ball speed proper coming off the face, where now the player can control it, right? Because that's at the end of the day, that ball speed coming off for those guys consistently is then where they can start dialing in that control.
And it's tricky. Like, I'm going to just prep your audience, like over 18 this week.
Okay.
18's a par 5 with water short. Guys are going to be hitting, fair with 600 yards, but they'll be hitting it on there. And water short, over's the place to be. Well, over's just is awful with the rough. And then it kind of goes uphill and then back down grain with water behind it. And to try and get that ball to come out hard enough without hitting it back into the water is going to be, or at least in the hazard, it's going to be a really good sized challenge. So if it's sitting up in the air, you want to shallow the delivery. And I like to do that by taking less loft, putting the ball forward and feeling like a little draw mentality. But the problem with that is if you have thick grass behind the ball and you're too shallow, then the ball doesn't come out either. So it's really a delicate balance. I was with Cameron Tringale on that spot. We must have hit little different variety of clubs, different types of shots for probably 15 minutes. And we came to the conclusion that it wasn't that good a place to be, that maybe the better play would be kind of back left side of the green, where you could putt it, or the rough wasn't nearly as bad on a much higher higher side of the green over on the left. So,
Mm-hmm.
but that's one of the things you do on the course is you got to plot your strategy and figure out where you want to be. So
Rapsodo Mobile Launch Monitor. Improve your golf swing today. Pro level launch data in the palm of your hand. It is very accurate, within 2% of a $20,000 unit. The Rapsodo MLM app automatically tracks stats and stores video with Shot Tracer, helpful for club gapping and understanding true distances for each club. Rapsodo MLM provides immediate feedback, data, and creates a better practice environment, not mindlessly hitting balls. Extremely portable. Case is about the size of a rangefinder. And you know what? You can use it both indoors and outdoors. I love this launch monitor. It's the Rapsodo Mobile Launch Monitor. Check it out at rapsodo.com, rapsodo.com, rapsodo.com.
Talk to me about Cameron Tringale. I mean, the guy has been just a model of consistency. I mean, he's off to a great start again on Thursday. Just a solid player. You're close to him. What would a win mean to Cameron Tringale to finally get that first win? Clearly, the guy's an incredible player.
yeah,
To get that first win.
He's really been a nice player for 10 years. I started working with him in 2010 or 11, something like that. It's been 10, 11 years since we've been together. First off, he's a fantastic human being. He's got a beautiful wife and a little baby, and he's grounded. He's a good man, and you're right. He's never won, but he's won more money than anybody else that hasn't. So he's had a really nice career. The interesting thing about Cameron is obviously a win would be huge because he, getting the majors, the exemption, all the stuff that goes with it. But I don't think that defines him as a man. I think that the things outside of golf are more important to him, and his family, and just being a good person and whatnot. And I think that he's not one of those guys that's like huge on status or ego. He just wants to play good. He wants to learn. He wants to get better. So it would certainly be amazing, but I don't think it would be career defining like it would for somebody. Maybe for me it would be. If I could ever sneak in a win or something like that, would. But he's wired a little bit differently. He really get a good head on his shoulders.
Well, you keep knocking on the door. That's you hear it all the time. Just keep putting yourself in a position to win.
Right. Right.
He will.
And the reality is he's clutch as well. So even though he's, I think, finished second 3 times, 4 times, had a bunch of third place finishes. I remember at New Orleans, one time he finished second. He birdied the last 2 holes, and they were both just last group clutch. It's just that Justin Rose went, I think, birdie as well to beat him by 1. So it's just, you're right. His time is coming. He'll be fine.
What's the biggest thing? What's the biggest thing he's gotten better at in short game over this 10-year stretch you've been with him?
Well, yeah, he originally hired me, I think, because his bunker game was not very good, and I would put him as an elite bunker player for sure. Now, and his wedge game around the greens, it's very good. I think 2 years ago, definitely he was, I think, top 10 in strokes gained around the green. But I would say his wedge game from like 50 to 120 is elite. It might be as good as anybody I've ever seen. So he hits a lot of shots, which you would assume would be outlier shots, which would be 87 yards, hitting it to 2 or 3 feet. He does a lot of that, and it's a weapon for him. And one of the things that allows him to do is, like, if he gets out of position and on a tough hole and drives it in the rough or behind a tree, he really has the patience to pitch it out there to 60, 70 yards in the fairway instead of compound the error. So he makes very few bogeys. If you look at his card, a lot of times he'll have a clean card or maybe 1 bogey in a round of golf. He's not making hardly any doubles, and it's because of I think he trusts his short game to the point where he can manage his full swing more smartly, or I don't want to say conservatively, but if he gets in trouble, he doesn't compound it.
Right. Yeah, the patience is there to hit the 75-yard shot to 6 feet, make it, and then get out of there rather than forcing the hand to. It's funny. Like just even my own game, I would say, have become more conservative that way, and a lot more talk that way of how patience tour players really are.
Right.
And
The other thing I would say, Travis, is that I think short game, when they do the strokes gain and all the analysis, they go, well, the short game maybe only accounts for a third of the score. But I'm going to tell you, if you're afraid to chip, you're not making many birdies, because now you can't go at any pins. And so there are a lot of guys out there that hit the ball in the middle of the green, not because it's a smart play, just because they're afraid to chip. Those are typically the ones that hire me, at some point in their career. And so trusting your short game, knowing that you're competent and you have that confidence, that allows you to make more birdies, I think, take more on, go for a par 5 and 2, and maybe you wouldn't otherwise. But if you don't have that trust, it just wears on you out there. It's just it's a kick in the teeth waiting to happen. So I really feel like those guys that we've all talked about that are really strong there, and it makes me feel good.
So here's a loaded question for you, because you could answer this a number of different ways. So let's see. In the full swing, we know there's mistakes that you would see common in an amateur, a mid-handicap, and then those mistakes would be very different than you would see with a touring professional, right? There's common mistakes, amateur versus pro. Amateurs tend to be steep. They tend to be over it. They tend to have the
Open
face more
face.
open. Yeah.
All that.
And then a tour player would be, maybe chasing it down the line a little too much, and versus, turning and, those kinds of things. So in short game, if you had to pinpoint one or two things, common mistake, mid-amateur or mid-handicap player versus a common mistake you see with a touring professional in short game.
The most common mistake, for sure, without even a close second place in the short game, is that when people are around the green, they'll lean the handle forward and hood the club face. Or when you push the handle 6 degrees forward, that face ought to just rotate right along with it. And Travis, from watching good players, when have you ever seen one with a hooded club face at address, unless they're hitting some sort of specially shot up off an upslope or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they hood it, they lean the handle and have the face pointing directly at the pin. I've never seen a pro do that. And then typically, because the club face is closed, a lot of them go into flexion in their lead wrist and take it inside. And so if you're closed and inside chipping, you're just toast. You got nothing.
Right.
Those guys can't get it on the green. And I've never seen a pro. I've seen pros inside, but usually it's inside and open. I've seen it closed, but usually it's outside and closed, like Furyk or Olazabal, and then they supinate it the other way. But inside and closed just doesn't work. And that's by far the number one error. And I think 90% of it's like it's set up, just horrible setup.
What about the tour player? What's a common thing you see out there that guys tend to kind of fall into, maybe where you have to kind of work through it a bit?
Well, I would say the most common error is that a lot of times they'll work on something in their full swing and it'll bleed into their short game, and vice versa. And that is something I've struggled with a little bit. I coached Charlie Hoffman for about 9 years, and we worked on his bunker takeaway and his chipping to get the lead rest a little bit more flexion. Well, his chipping and bunker got better, but his full swing got worse, right? So it's like just keeping things separate, I think, is a big error. If you're thinking technique-wise, I would say, let's see, I would just say rhythm happens to be a big issue, and maintaining that rhythm. But you don't see a ton of errors. I mean, I don't know too many tour players missing shots inside 100 yards. It doesn't happen that often.
Yeah.
So
when you look at, you talk about this different wrist action, right? Because in the full swing, they're coming in with that flat flexed lead wrist,
right?
And then in short game, they're trying to get some of that out, when they're trying to hit those.
They're trying to get the ball up in the air anyway. Certainly, yeah, you want to be somewhat an extension and releasing it and maintaining the extension as you release the club. and it's hard. And it's,
Yeah.
but I always tell people, like, listen, your putting swing has nothing to do with your driver swing. They're independent. They're separate. And you got to understand that to be good from 10 yards, to have softness and control and be able to put spin on the ball and, uh, you know, get the club turf interaction the way you want it, you got to have a completely different mindset than you do when you're trying to compress a 5-iron. And so understanding what's optimal kind of from each situation, I think, is one of the keys to being a player that can travel, that doesn't have holes in his game or her game. So
It's interesting. Sometimes I'd love to get your thoughts on this, where you'll set up shaft, slightly forward, minimal lean, lead wrist feels like it's just a touch of extension. And sometimes I'm hitting shots where I'll feel like I just keep the wrist extended. I'll take it back. I feel not a lot of wrist cock, and I'll kind of just keep it more passive, almost like a Jason Day
right.
stricker, and then I'll turn through and just keep it passive, knowing that I've got a little extension, it'll pass. And then sometimes I'll feel a little more play with the wrist, a little more softness with the wrist, and I'll kind of get that shot how I like. I'll kind of go back and forth with, it feels almost fused versus maybe a little softness in play. Is that just, there's a lot of ways to perceive the extension of the wrist and the release?
Well, that, and you're talking about, to some extent, you're talking about width. Jason Day has a ton of width. There's not a lot of elbow fold, or like I said, and one of the keys, I think, to that is setting up with kind of a soft lead arm. So the lead arm is soft, it's easier to get the lead wrist and extension, right? So, and then you can just maintain those angles, and you have, and it really forces your upper body to rotate. If you're going to maintain the wrist and elbow angles, if your body stops, then obviously you can't maintain anything, right? So it forces you to, I like the support of the body rotation. And I would just say that's one shot among many. It's kind of a style choice. I think those styles tend to be, in certain shots, give you a strength. And I would say, like, if you're going to hit like a 8-iron across a green, or have a very simple mid-flight pitch off a fairway, that feeling of maintaining your width and supporting with your turn, keeping the wrist angle the same, would be great.
Yeah.
But if I put you in U.S. Open rough a yard off the green, and you're short-sided, that's not going to work so good. So there you have to have way more wrist, and you have to stabilize and let that club pass and increase the angles in your wrist in the delivery. And so really what you want to be is great at both. And that's where the quality of your training would come in. If you're sitting in a pile, always practicing the same shot, you're not really developing judgment skills, but you're handcuffing yourself to one technique. So, I told you, judging the lies and adapting is key this week. It's key to be a good player, period. And so that's one of the keys why you always just throw balls around the green and just do whatever. And I remember when Ricky Fowler came out, I was like, "Hey, Ricky, how'd you get so good?" He goes, "Well, I just threw balls around everywhere and just never repeated a shot. And if you're practicing right, it almost looks like you're screwing around, because there's should be very little structure. You're just playing, sensing different shots. I'm going to hit this one high, this one low, changing slopes and lies and clubs."
So that ball starts sitting down in the hay, U.S. Open. I got to get more play in the wrist, and almost like a little down cock, and then release.
No, I don't like the down cock, because I think that ruins the rhythm. But I would create the angle of address, so I'd widen out and lean. That creates angle. Now the club's working more up.
Okay.
And from now that's more up, I can still go ahead and release it. So I don't ever want to go and then down cock it. Now I've certainly seen some players do that, but I don't think the elite ones do. And like the Seve Ballesteroses of the world didn't ever do that.
Well,
but you need to control the angle of the delivery for sure, based on the lie.
So talk to me about this Stewart Cink guy. Here's a guy that he's won twice now this year, and it's been cool to see some of these, how could I put it, experienced players, right, in a young man's game in many ways. You look at a Stewart, guy just continues to get better. He's gotten longer off the tee. what's been the most impressive thing to you in your department in short game that you think has been really cool to watch with Stewart this year?
Well, his emotional maturity is, believe it or not, even at this advanced age, is improving weekly. And his ability to focus and let bad shots go, I think, is where he's seen a lot of growth. But 2 years ago, about 2 years ago, he asked me to do an analysis, kind of a deep dive into his stats, because he had a horrible year. He was like 134th or something like that and so I showed him that if he'd improve his stroke average by 1.1 strokes a day, that he would be in the top 10 in the FedEx at the end of the year. And we just put a plan together to get those 1.5 strokes. Of that, 0.5 of it was going to be by adding 10 yards of distance, because you gain half a stroke a day for every 10 yards. And I thought that was very doable. He had the ball really far back in his stance. He really wasn't loading and going to get it because of that. And so actually the week before Safeway, he came to Omaha and I helped him with that. I said, hey, move the ball up. You want to hit it further, move the ball up, load into your right glute. And then I want you to pretend like you're throwing a medicine ball into the wall. You got to go up and forward and go get the ball. And his launch angle changed. He went to ping and got fit for less loft, less spin, and so he's launching it high, and he gained 12 yards. So that's over a half a shot. So that was half of it. Then we decided he needed to make way less bogeys, way less penalty shots. So he created kind of his own system based on what I had suggested. He changed it a little bit, actually made it more aggressive than what I was trying to propose, but he's cut his penalty shots in half. So that's like 0.3 of one, and then a little better short game and a little more patience. And he's basically got his 1.1, or he's very close to 1.1 better. So
and he's currently 17th right now in the FedEx.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
The plan works. That's always fun, right?
Well, you got to have one. I always tell people, hope is not a plan.
No.
And it's got to be based on realism and science and real data, and you can't let emotion dictate what you're going to do. I think you got to think it through and think, where are we going to gain ground here? And then you got to create a plan of action. And sometimes it's messy, but you got to be willing to take the chance and go for it, so to speak. And he's done that. And by the way, Stewart is still very strong. You might say 47, but he hits it as far as anybody other than maybe Bryson. I think he led the field at Hilton Head in driving distance when he won. So he can still really move it. And the weeks when he chips and putts good, he's always been an elite iron player, always. And the week that he chips and putts good, he's going to have a chance to win, I think.
Yeah. Well, he's won twice, and, Open champion winner, and he's going to be there in the playoffs, I would imagine, probably all the way to Atlanta, and have a chance to just cap this thing off with a huge year.
Yeah.
Which would be really cool. All right, last question for you. This Branden Hagy, right? You work with him as well. Speaking of distance, this dude can move it. You got to get.
He hits it so far.
Oh my God, he does, and you got to get excited, right, with a player like that. We got people who have that gear of length, because as you just mentioned, what it's worth, stroke wise.
Right.
You're thinking, okay, he's already got this speed.
Right.
And we just dial this department in, and this dude's going to be a world beater.
Well, just so people know here, so the 16th hole this week at 3M.
Okay.
Probably 2 of the days it's like 4:34, but they'll move it up. They'll move the tee up and let the guys have a chance to knock it on. And last year's tournament, Stewart had driver on, and he was playing with Branden.
Okay.
And Branden pulled out a 2-iron. Stewart says, I nutted this driver to get it on the green. And I'm looking at this guy with the 2-iron. I'm thinking, why is he laying up? And he knocked his 2-iron right on the green. So he hits his 2-iron as far as Stewart sometimes hits his driver. It's crazy. But so the real story with Branden, he's been playing amazing the last 2 months. He's been near the lead, several top 10s, had some incredible rounds, a lot of 63s and 4s. The real issue is that I feel like his wedge game, I started working with him like 3 years ago, maybe. two years ago, whatever, 2.5, and his wedge game got great right away. His putting's lagged, so that was an issue that we've continued to work on. At John Deere, however, he led the field in putting after 3 rounds, which is why he was right there. But the real issue is he started working with Tony Ruggiero in his full swing, and they changed his backswing and his delivery. Get his right arm a little bit more in front of his body. So before, when you're hitting your driver 340 and you get a degree or two off, it can go in the wrong fairway really easily. And he was really struggling for, I would say, with repeatability and control with all that firepower. And in the last 5 months or so, he's hitting the ball much better. He's gaining strokes. He doesn't have the penalty shots that he used to have. And, before he could hit 8-iron 30 yards offline, and now he's put him in there like everybody else. But he's got all that length that not everybody has. And so I think now that he's kind of understands his golf swing, he's going to be in good shape for a very long time. I would be shocked if he's not a good player for the next 10 years.
Yeah, it just feels like it feels like the stars are aligning a little bit for him, doesn't it?
I think so.
He was 6th at the Rocket Mortgage, 18th at the John Deere Classic, and man, you got that kind of firepower. Just
right. He was second place going in the last day, so he was knocking on the door. Just struggled a little bit that last day, but he's when he plays good, he can go. And so now I think he knows what he's doing. I think he's going to be in great shape.
Well, James, I can't thank you enough. Some great insight here, and I appreciate you coming on the podcast. Thanks for I know you had a busy week, and you got up with me here this morning to do this. So, a day off today, or you got?
Oh no, I'm headed to the course right now. But I appreciate you having me on, and enjoyed it. I always like talking golf, so anytime.
All right, thanks a bunch, right, James. Right, we'll talk to you soon.
You got it. All right, bye.
I just want to interrupt this interview real quick and give a shout out to my friends over at OnCore Golf. OnCore provides some of the most cutting-edge technology in a golf ball that I have ever seen. Their team in Buffalo, New York is changing the script of golf technology through their perimeter-weighted designs, which offer players enhanced accuracy and control for every shot on the course. With their award-winning Elixir and Avant 55 golf balls, they are transforming the game for players of all skill levels. Visit OnCoreGolf.com/Travis Fulton for more details about their products that are revolutionizing the game. Now back to the Stripe Show.